people who decided, to hell with it, I'm going for it. How'd it go and what did you go for? Been dealing with a bad bout of stress and related muscle pain for about a month. I use a pen from time to time, and last week I was at the smoke shop and I noticed those gummies they sell. I asked the guy behind the counter about the gummies and if he had any suggestions. Weirdly enough, he didn't really know anything about them. I had been in before and overheard long conversations with the counter people counseling prospective customers. But he did say that a lot of people came in to buy one called something like high dose or, whatever. I haven't participated in any related things in about 30 years, and the guy did mention that he had heard it was, quote, pretty strong when I was paying for it, but it was such a teeny little candy bit. And I got home around 8 p.m., and without even reading the packaging, I opened it, broke the gummy in half, ate it, and started watching a movie. About 30 minutes later, I felt a tiny bit of the old effect, but I felt it was quite muted and insufficient. I know gummies hit different, so I decided to wait another 15, and still nothing. So I decided to YOLO the remainder. I literally thought to myself, screw it, what's the worst that can happen? And popped the other half. Obviously, nothing happened immediately. In fact, I didn't even notice anything more pronounced for quite some time. Once the movie was over and I got up, however, I started to really feel it. By the time I made it to the bathroom and started whizzing, I knew I was in trouble. The thought occurred to me that perhaps I had been taking a whiz for like an hour, or was it 10 seconds? Or was I really even taking a whiz at all? And I still felt the effects continuing to build. The rest of the night was absolutely horrific. I'd wanted to de-stress, but now I was in a full panic. My perception of time was intermittent. I don't quite know how to explain it, but I felt mentally trapped, like my thoughts and spirit were pinned under a collapsed building. I was overcome by a feeling of doom and fear. My legs were shaky and I felt I couldn't breathe. I tried fighting back with logic, but my thoughts were too slippery to get a foothold against the waves of fear and panic. The only thing that helped a tiny bit was unsteadily pacing in the living room with the TV on. I think I finally went to sleep around 4 a.m., woke up the next morning for work, and it was slightly better, but I was still a total mess. I thought I had broken myself and I was just going to be stuck like that forever. I finally looked at the packaging and realized it had been a 1,000 milligram gummy. Holy crap. This is why you can't take me places. Yeah, you've messed up pretty bad when even the act of taking a whiz becomes a sort of philosophical debate while you're standing there. Story 2. It's a long story. I was at a work event a while ago, mandatory fun and all that. But this one was at a pub at least. We were all seated at this one long table, sort of self-aggregated by team, with myself near one end of it. I was busy chatting away with my fellow senior engineers with zero reason to go anywhere when I overheard a girl speaking Spanish at the other end of the table. Curious, I looked over to find the speaker was our new intern, a pretty Chinese girl. As I came to find out later, she had done a foreign exchange program in Peru and came to love the people and the culture, returning several times after the program was over to visit various places around the country. That day at the pub, she was apparently showing off her newfound mastery of the Spanish language to another intern, some Spanish guy, when I overheard them. I couldn't just let this go, so I wandered over and tried to get on her radar. By chance, I too spoke pretty decent Spanish at the time, having just gotten out of a long relationship with a Bolivian girl. In fact, we had been in Peru literally at the exact time as the intern, on our last trip together as a couple. We even went to the same places on the same days. She literally might have overheard us arguing. A truly remarkable coincidence. Needless to say, I omitted some of the details as I struck up a conversation. We talked all through the event, shared experiences as we drank a ton on the company's dime, played shuffleboard and darts, and overall had a great time. By this point, the dude was mad-dogging daggers into my soul, making it known with every fiber of his being that my continued presence was a most unwelcome development. Pretty sure he had arranged to be her ride home and was still clinging to the hope that he hadn't completely struck out that evening. He milled about for a while, made some noise and gestures, but eventually left. As the evening wound down, the massive crowd got winnowed down to just a booth with about half a dozen people, including myself, the intern, some work, quote, couples. The conversation still flowed casually and freely, but was beginning to wind down. It was at this moment that I did the craziest thing I had ever done or even considered doing in my entire life. I put down my drink, looked her straight in the eye, and put my hand on her leg under the table. Just planted it solidly on her thigh, zero room for plausible deniability. We continued to chat as if nothing was happening, but time literally froze for me as I waited to see her reaction. In hindsight, it was a fantastically stupid thing to do. The odds that I had simply misread the situation were stacked astronomically against me, and the punishment would come sharp and swift. I could visualize with perfect clarity the meeting I would be having first thing the next day, my manager on my right, the HR lady across the desk from me. She politely yet tersely states that everyone present is of course familiar with the reasons for said meeting. No one would have to suffer the indignity of hearing it spelled out in passages quoted from the employee handbook. Basically, goodbye career. And yet I went for it because, god dang it, a coincidence that ridiculous had to mean something. Even a non-religious person has to recognize when the universe is sending them a giant blinking neon sign. We've been married for 7 years now. Our daughter just turned 3, with another on the way. What are the odds, eh? Story 3. After 10 years of school and another 15 in practice, I was working in a healthcare office. Little rooms, back and forth from room to room all day. On my feet all day. I never saw the sun. Yes, the pay was decent, but not mind-blowing. My life was leaking away. One day, I saw a criminal. I asked him what it was like in jail. He looked around and told me it was just like my office, except his cell was bigger. He had a window and a TV. I'd worked so hard to place myself in a crappy jail. And that was it, I quit. I started a dial-up internet company. Before the dot-com bubble burst, I sold it to the local telco for decent money. I used that cash to retrain, wrote some healthcare software, and started a new company. I made really good money there. Then after the 2008 financial crisis, I pulled out all of my savings and dove headfirst into picking up as much property as I could for pennies on the dollar. As you know, what happened to the value of property since then, so yeah. Today, I'm just months from, quote, retirement age. Although to be honest, I've hardly worked for years. I've got a beautiful home in Canada overlooking a nature preserve, a stunning home in the US Sunbelt, investment properties, boats. None of it means a thing without the ability to enjoy it. And that's probably the nicest thing I have, time to enjoy life and good health. I can do anything I like, go anywhere I want, and that's real freedom. And sure, that's all very nice to have, but it's not the best thing about my life. I have an amazing wife who has been with me since I was a teen, a couple of great kids, and I also have a really smart 2-year-old granddaughter who has the best sense of humor. So life is very good. It all worked out. Story 4. When I initially got divorced, my ex-husband basically had a much better lawyer and got 60-40 custody. When the kids were a few years older, they told me they didn't want to live with him anymore. I was a single mom, obviously, trying to make ends meet and honestly kind of failing at it. I asked them to their faces, look, this is going to be hard. You sure you want this? It's going to cost a lot of money and likely a lot of heartache. That's when they told me stories of him drinking and driving with them in the car and worse. I had to go for it no matter the cost, the heartache. We went back to court. It was ugly. He would call CPS and accuse me of things that weren't true just to have an investigation on my record. He would call the police to my house and say I was mistreating the kids. It cost around $10,000 in the end, but I got them at about 85% of the time, and as the primary custodial parent. They've grown up safe, with education as a forefront, which he never cared about at all. Sports, I would pay for sports and he would refuse to take them to practices and games. Friends, he never let them go out with friends as weekends were, quote, for family time. And healthy examples of how a relationship should be. My now 19-year-old is in college with a full scholarship for nuclear engineering, and my 16-year-old is thriving in high school with sports and a GPA of 4.0, and a lovely little GF that I like. Things worked out so much better than they would have had they been with their dad. He's been basically a useless dad with no job for years. Story 5. After reading dozens of threads from people who quit their jobs and just went and traveled, in 2022 I decided I'd do the same, quit my very nice and comfortable job and went on a 1-year sabbatical in Japan. Greatest decision of my life. Met so many people, journeyed all across Japan, staying in different locations all the time, no work stress, just me thinking about what I'll eat the next day. Yeah, I spent most of my savings and the year afterwards was a bit rough, but I'd do it again. The memories I made are priceless. I guess the only downside is that I just kept thinking back to that year and wish I could go back because regular life is so crap in comparison. Yeah, the downside of an incredible adventure. Sounds like a first world problem though I wouldn't mind having. Story 6. I'm an artist but managed a bookstore for years because my useless gambler husband was so unreliable. When he divorced me for his AP, 1990, I made a connection with an antique store and started doing hand-painted furniture for them, which expanded into wall murals and museum reproductions. I was a full-time professional artist for 25 years until I retired. I made slightly more than a teacher and was fully self-supporting and loved what I did. I had 4 employees and we had a blast. Never would have happened if my first husband hadn't cheated. Story 7. My mom passed away in December 2022, and in January 2023, I had a kidney stone removed. While I was in pre-op at the hospital, I said, screw it, I'm going to run an ultramarathon. I'm not a runner, I've never been a runner, and I knew nothing about running. So I recorded a video committing to it and posted it on social media. As soon as the stent came out, I started training. 6 months later, I ran that 50K race. I used the whole thing as a contest entry for the DDPY, Positively Unstoppable Challenge. At the end of 2023, I was named champion by WWE Hall of Famer Diamond Dallas Page and got to fly to his home and meet him. I got my very own wrestling belt with my name on it, and all of it because I said, to hell with it, I'm going to do something so amazing that even I can't believe it. Story 8. Low level, but when I sat my driving test, the instructor asked me to demonstrate parking into a bay almost right outside the test center, about 2 minutes into a 1-hour assessment. I did the maneuver, and as I finished, I glanced over at his score sheet and saw him mark down a major fault, which meant I'd failed the test already. I remember being crushed and feeling the air go out of my lungs completely. I had no clue what I could have done wrong, let alone a major fault. I thought about ending the test there, but I thought, screw it, I'm doing the best drive of my life for the next 58 minutes. Maybe he'll let it slide. Turns out I'd seen the wrong part of the sheet, and he'd actually marked the part to say which maneuver we'd done. I actually passed the test with one minor infraction. If I'd thrown in the towel when I thought I'd failed, I'd been waiting at least 6 months before I could try again. Story 9. Was spinning my tires in my hometown for years, didn't love my job, and wasn't dating very seriously, and it was starting to feel like Groundhog Day, doing the same crap every single day. Decided to move to a bigger city a few hours away after an online job application landed me an interview. Just said, screw it, I need this. Within a few years, I met my wife, made a lot of new friends, went on some adventures, and bought my first house soon after. I think back on how it used to be and how casually I was like, should I apply? I don't know, that's a big step, maybe I'm overdoing it. And the thought of never doing it and having stayed in that old life terrifies me now. Story 10. In my first year of undergrad, I was the final person to be cut, limited spots, and not offered the job in the co-op program I had applied for. The next year, I went out to try and get another co-op, and as I was leaving the interview hall, I saw the same guy who had interviewed me the previous year for the company I had just barely not made the cut with, and he was alone at the table. I figured, what the hell, and approached him and told him I was still interested in the job. My other interviews that year didn't pan out, but he did call me back and offer me the co-op. I'm currently in my 20th year of working for that company. Story 11. 6 years ago, I decided to get a PhD in STEM and moved away from home after getting into a program. In that time, my mom's cancer has come back twice, nearly ending her both times from acute kidney failure the first time and ventricular tachycardia the second time. 2020 wreaked its havoc. My dad passed away right before the lockdowns. My grandfather passed away a year later. My advisor did and said a lot of toxic stuff throughout this. I eventually slipped into a deeper depression and ended up on leave of absence in 2022 due to said depression with no intention of coming back. Then decided I had nothing better to do in life and went back anyway, rejoining the toxic lab environment. Immediately upon my return, my advisor declared I could no longer use my first project in my thesis, and I've since been working my back off, finishing 3 completely fresh / untouched projects between the start of 2023 and now. And I'll be defending my thesis in a few weeks, just in time for a new president-elect to presumably slash academic funding, gut the government sector, and likely damage the private sector through tariffs and enacting anti-STEM / anti-healthcare policy. It's been a wild, depressing ride through and through. Story 12. Used to see a really pretty girl across the library in college, spent an entire semester telling myself that one day I'd work up the courage to go talk to her. I was hanging out with the librarian one day, an old family friend, and when I heard someone walking behind me, told myself, if I turn around and it's that girl, I'm going to ask her out. I knew full well it wouldn't be her when I made that little pact. There were thousands of people at that college. Well, I almost fainted when I turned around. Guess who? I managed to choke up a 2-liner from my favorite movie and we became friends. She was just out of a bad breakup and wouldn't commit to anything. But after months and months, she gave me a chance. Over a decade later now, and we're still together, 2 wonderful kids and a pupper. If you get a chance, take it. Take it while you got a chance. Yep, you know you found the one when you can quote cheesy movie lines to them and they don't immediately run away screaming. Story 13. Left a POS, found out I was the side chick after years together, stayed and let him manipulate me a little longer after I found out, so it wasn't a real relationship I left. Because I met a man at the frickin' club where I was dancing that just felt different. I was obviously at a low point in my life. I broke my boundary of not talking to customers outside work for him. He told me to jump in with both feet, that he would treat me right, that a couple should be best friends, and he wanted to learn how to love me. He knew about POS, dude. I was honest. Screw it. Worst comes to worst, I'll go back to the club. We're married. Son is about to turn 1, and he treats me like a freaking queen. Still opens the car door for me when he's upset with me. He puts us first, always, and we invest in each other and help each other grow even when it's uncomfortable. Story 14. Was down bad after a divorce and losing my job right after. I was doing odd jobs to make ends meet for 3 months. One night after dinner, I get a call from a woman asking for me and if I'd be interested in a job. I asked what the details were, and they were real vague. You'd be driving around, doing their tasks, getting groceries, taking care of kids, traveling some, just whatever he needs. And they wouldn't discuss pay or anything. Said screw it, took the interview the next day and met in a high-rise downtown. It was about 5 minutes long and again was real vague about my job role and pay. Again, I said, what do I have to lose, and went with it. Ended up working for him for 8 years and was paid very well. They took care of my daughter through several medical emergencies, got to see the world and fly private the majority of the time. I don't work for him anymore, but he has landed me with great connections that have helped me through my career. Story 15. After I got my first place, a trailer in the woods, I got really stoned one night and watched The Notebook. It made me miss my kindergarten crush so much. We were best friends through school, dated on and off, and I had moved out of state. But I broke a lease, left everything, packed a box and my puppy and drove 15 hours straight to surprise him at his college apartment in the middle of the night to be with him. He had 3 roommates and a girlfriend. So me and the puppy lived with him and his 3 roommates for a few months before I decided the timing was wrong, obviously. A few years later, he flew down to my apartment and moved me and my pup up to a house we still live in to this day. We'll be married 13 years in April. Story 16. My closest friend and I decided to move 6 hours away from home after graduating university. When you know one in the city and the job I moved for only paid $8.50 an hour. Yes, a college graduate moved away from his home to pursue a job that paid $8.50 an hour. But that was back in 2000, so it wasn't too bad. Anyway, I took that job and worked my way to the top, used that experience to find another job that paid better and had much better benefits. Currently, I make well over $100K, have great benefits, and am married. I guess the point is, don't be afraid to start at the bottom. Don't let your pride put you in a place where you think you deserve more. You'll deserve more when you prove yourself. If I didn't take that entry-level job for that measly pay, not sure where I'd be right now. Story 17. I grew up in a physically and emotionally cruel family. Had no idea what a healthy relationship looked like till my 30s. I was drink dependent until my late 20s and have a long history of trying to save people both at work and in my personal life. My to hell with it, I'm going for it moment was leaving. As a dude, I left a gal I was with for over a decade in a toxic codependent relationship. She was financially predatory and emotionally and physically cruel towards me. I kept photos of my ripped clothes and recordings of her bragging about hurting me because I figured someday someone would doubt what she did to me. I found a gal who makes more money than I do, supports me financially and emotionally when I need it, explodes my concept of perfection every day, and showed me for the first time what joy in a home feels like. I actually still get surprised years later when I still feel joy going home now instead of sleeping in the streets to avoid being physically harmed while I slept. We got married and are planning on a family. I'm so happy I left. And if you're enjoying the video, please don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos just like this. Story 18. After a history professor ruined an entire field for me, I wanted to be a history professor. I wanted to drift around for years not knowing what I wanted to do with my life. I've always loved film since I was a kid, but didn't know how I can get involved. I started volunteering as a cameraman for a live broadcast show. Turns out you can get paid to work with cameras like that. Despite many people saying that working in the film, TV industry is finicky and not stable, it truly made me happy, so I decided to screw it and in college switched my major to film and media and television production, graduated with my associates. I then transferred to a 4-year college and started doing gigs left to right and found a mentor that truly cares about me and wants me to succeed and drilled me on how to be in the industry and the standards. I recently just got into one of the best film programs in the country, and now I have a decent amount of work and credits under my belt, and now I'm a first AC. Don't think just because you are in college, Reddit, you can change and have a different calling. If it makes you happy, go for it regardless of what people think of it. Put your happiness first. Story 19. Applying for college. I wanted to leave my town in the South and go somewhere else in the country and be exposed to people with other worldviews. My school counselor didn't think it was possible to get into the schools I applied to because no one from my high school had gone to those programs before. Almost everyone stayed in the same state or at the very least in the South for college. Had to have my mom come in for a meeting with a counselor to talk about setting realistic expectations. My mom didn't buy it and told her to please write the dang letter of recommendation. Fast forward several months and I got into several of my picks. Fast forward several years and my mom still gets emails from that counselor about the colleges she's touring, including some that I had gotten into, and the places some of the subsequent graduates have gone to for college. Story 20. I was 30, depressed, and had a small savings left over from my father's life insurance. I had a remote wedding for my brother and bought a one-way ticket to Bali, and my backpack traveled for 4 months on $7,000 back in 2017 through Southeast Asia. It was both the scariest thing and best thing I've ever done. I traveled, saw things, made friends, and learned I could depend on myself and the social nets around me, and that the best things in life are other people and the relationships you build. As an introvert, that's a bit of a hard medicine, but it was necessary to learn that. If anyone thinks they're ready for a walkabout or traveling sabbatical, reach out and I'll happily encourage you. The first step is scary, but it's really feasible and the journey is worthwhile. Story 21. I never asked girls for the number. This beautiful girl I kept seeing at Aldi while shopping randomly showed up at my pawn shop I managed. She pawned her dad's air compressor. She came in again and asked where she could get some grass. I smoked all day and had some on me, and she bought what I had. Next time, I asked for her number because I couldn't get a hold of her dad if she needed more grass. I wasn't a dealer, but I found a reason to ask her for her number as I was shy, so to hell with it, she could say no. But she wrote it down on a small piece of paper. I confessed an hour later that I just wanted to get her number to go out on a date with her. 4 hours later, she said she would. 9 years and counting now, we are married, and she's my best friend, and I still think she's beautiful. I still have that paper she wrote her number down on in my safe. Story 22. Left my girlfriend, horrible situation for both of us, and I just couldn't take it anymore. Packed my stuff and crashed at a friend's place until I got my own apartment. That was about a month ago, and it's depressingly lonely. Probably for the best, and I'm doing better mentally, but my life feels very empty. I don't really have close friends, and my social circle is very small. Kind of kicks in really hard when I come home from work and just have nobody to hang out with, really. I'm in a dart league, so that 2 to 3 hours is really the only social aspect I have every week. I suck at making friends and meeting new people. Meanwhile, she has a lot of friends downtown and likes to go out all the time. So I know she's out having fun with everyone, and I'm just kind of sitting here night after night wondering what to do now. Story 23. I've done it twice. Once I was moving to my current city, barely had 2 coppers to rub together, moved down with no idea where I was staying, flirted with homelessness a few times, but eventually ended up on my feet. It was crazy at the time, but I've been here 20 years, longer than I've been anywhere else. Met my husband down here, met my best friends, some of my family moved down here too, and I regret nothing. Second time was about 4 years ago. I was a couple of years back into work after having time off raising kids, working a go-nowhere job in a place that was about to close down. Was trying to work out what I wanted to do with my last 20 to 30 years of working life, so I decided to start an apprenticeship at 36 years old. It was stressful, we didn't have a lot of money for a few years, and luckily my husband's pay was enough to cover the deficit in my salary. There was a lot of work, and I definitely thought about giving up a few times, especially mid-lockdown stuff while trying to work, study remotely, deal with 3 kids, schooling remotely, and all the mental breakdowns that came along with it. But I stuck with it, and now I'm 40 and fully qualified, working in a fantastic place doing a job that I love. Sometimes stuff doesn't work out, but through a great deal of stubbornness and a lot of hard work and luck, mine did. There were also choices that just felt right in the moment. Story 24. When I was getting ready to get out of the restaurant industry into pretty much anything else, I had a couple problems as I'm old school and wanted to give 2-week notice before moving on. They did me right, and I didn't want to burn them. 2 interviews went well, but naturally they wanted me starting right away, and with finishing up elsewhere, I missed out. To be I don't think I've actually liked these jobs anyway. So I quit my job, relying on 6 months savings to keep me afloat. After 3 or 4 months, if I didn't get going, I would just fall back on a cooking job and try again later. While I wasn't going to be finished at the job on the Friday, we had an interview that morning. I worked afternoons, and I was hired and started the following Monday. So the transition was real quick, and I don't have to worry about dipping into the savings. Story 25. I was 25 and I had just received my nursing degree, and my dad passed away 3 weeks after I got my degree. I was mentally lost because I became a nurse honestly because my dad was a doctor and that was his dream. I was beside myself when he only got to see the beginning of my career and decided I had to get out of the state I was in. I opened a physical map of the United States, closed my eyes, and just put my finger down where it went, and that's where I moved. I ended up in Oregon from Iowa, and it was just a fantastic experience. I'm back in Iowa now, long married with children and so on and so forth, but that was one of the most empowering experiences of my life and I will never regret it. Story 26. I took a job in the late 90s for a networking firm that I didn't think I was qualified for. It turns out I was more than qualified and I thrived. The company was booming and life was good. After 10 years, things kind of turned around and suddenly, according to my boss, I became an idiot, unreliable, untrustworthy, and underskilled. This was beaten into me for 7 more years and affected my mental health. I actually had to go into therapy over a person with a failing business telling me I was worthless. At one point, I said, screw it, and put my resume out there. Within 2 weeks, I had a job offer for an awesome company. It turns out all the stuff my old boss was saying was stemming from poor management decisions and he needed a scapegoat. Been here for 10 years and I could see myself retiring from this place. It's a great place to work and my salary has literally doubled since I left. This cements the old saying, always bet on yourself. Story 27. I was living in NYC with a boyfriend who was emotionally cruel. I hated everything about my life, hated NYC, hated him, but felt so trapped. I woke up one morning and decided it was time for a change. That same day, I broke up with the BF, told my boss I was either quitting or they would have me work remotely, and bought a one-way ticket across the country. I had nothing lined up on the other side, no job, very little family and friends, but I was done. Best decision I've ever made in my life, and I'm still proud of myself for making the jump. First day in my new state, I met my now husband. The job kept me remote, and I built a beautiful community of friends and new family. Never looked back. Story 28. Quit my job I hated as an LEO to pursue IT. Had no backup job. Stupid, I know, but I hated every second of it. And a less than 1-year-old child and girlfriend who was a stay-at-home mom. Landed a job doing landscaping a week later to make ends meet / insurance, who was flexible enough to allow me to go to some of my classes. Within the first year of community college, got a cushy help desk job making more money than my LEO job. 1 year later, making more than an executive LEO staff, something like 4 to 5 years later, making more than the chief of police, which probably would have taken a 15-plus year career to get to that level, if at all. I say all these because I think my career trajectory and what my life would look like now if I stayed a cop, I'd probably be living in low-income housing as I was when I was a cop, definitely some mental health issues, depression, etc., and not be nearly as comfortable in having the quality of life and financial freedom for my family. It was one of the single best decisions I had ever made in my life. Story 29. Matched with a guy I found really cute on a dating app and we chatted on the app for like a day or so. A couple of days later, we matched on the app. We had a 4.5-hour conversation over the phone. Following day, we're talking and he's like, I don't usually do this right off the bat, but would you like to come over tonight and hang out? I hesitated for a minute or so, but I was like, yeah, all right, screw it. Let's do this thing. We hung out all night and I ended up sleeping on his couch that night because he was too tired to drive me home. I live an hour away and don't really drive, especially at night, so he had to come get me, which was fine with me. He is the kindest, most generous, most respectful man I have ever met in my entire damn life. Also one of the geekiest, which I love because I'm also a huge nerd. It's been 2 months and we're still having a hell of a good time together when we can see each other, which is difficult due to opposing work schedules plus the distance. But we talk every day on the phone and have a grand old time. Plus, his dogs love the crap out of me, but they're dogs, so they'd probably love anyone who gave them affection, but still, it's nice to know they like me. Story 30. When I decided to go into residential treatment for my disorder, I was going with blind faith in my outpatient psychologist that the emotional hell I was living in would improve if my health and weight improved. I was going for it in the sense that I was capitulating and letting go of behaviors I had for like 20 plus years. I spent 6 weeks in the inpatient unit, eating, therapy, med changes. I am in a larger body now, but in therapy, slowly recognizing that I am more at peace, not totally, but not paralyzed by anxiety worsened by malnutrition. It's still a daily struggle with disordered thoughts, but I am a better spouse and coworker. I took a leap of faith and I'm thankful for my supportive family and outpatient team. Story 31. I started dating this guy